I'm going to give people just a moment to file in here, and then we'll go over some technical details before we hand it off to the moderator for the day. But welcome, everyone. All right. Yeah, so we'll get started, and I'll type this out for anybody that comes in a little bit later or misses part of this as I'm speaking, but this is a Zoom webinar, not Zoom meeting. So you don't have to worry about being seen or heard. Your cameras and your microphones are disabled by default. So when it comes to interaction, you can use the Q&A and the chat function. If you use the chat function and you want everybody to see a message, if there's a prompt for a discussion from the panelists, for example, or if you have any kind of technical issue or just a comment that you want other people to see, just make sure that you select all panelists and attendees in the to drop down menu from the chat window. But if you have a question specifically for the panelists, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A function. It'll make it a lot easier for us to sift through what has been answered and what's still open and pending. You can ask questions anonymously. You can upvote questions. You can add comments. And it's just a much better way overall to handle the Q&A. So we're going to ask that you use Q&A for any questions. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Annetta Stroud, today's moderator.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Annetta Stroud, Associate Director, Content and Curriculum at AACRAO, and I would like to welcome you to today's AACRAO Coffee Break, Protecting Your Institution from Academic Record Fraud. It is a pleasure to be on the line with all of you today as we navigate the challenges that are presented by our current crisis together. Next slide, Mike. Today, we are really excited to have AACRAO's very own Julia Funaki and Ann Koenig, both Associate Directors for International, to share their updates and resources for institutions during the COVID crisis. As always, we are really hopeful that our technology will not fail us. However, this is a large Zoom call and with a number of panelists, and we're all working at the mercy of our home Wi-Fi, as most of you are as well. So today we will not be using the video function and all your mics is muted so we can save on the bandwidth. With so many of you on the call, we know that we may not be able to answer all of your questions, but don't worry, we will be collecting all of your questions and we will be adding them to the ever-growing list of policy questions that our guidance team is working through every day. And it may be as it will resurface as an article in our Connect newsletter, a specific guidance document, or another coffee break. If you do have questions, please be sure to name the organization that you would like to answer the question. And luckily for today, they are both Julia and Ann as our experts on fraud for institutional documentation. Next slide, please. As we navigate the challenges through this crisis together, AACRAO, your association, is here to connect you with our network of colleagues and working through these challenges together in the time of unprecedented disruption in our profession. We have decided to open up our content vault to the higher education community through our free 3 months membership option. If your membership has lapsed or if there are others on campus you would like to have access to, our resources are here to support you through this transition. And so we would love for you to take advantage of this free membership option. And just to let you know that we are offering our free membership through June 30th. Now, as for our guidance, AACRAO has been working really diligently to provide specific guidance to institutions as we navigate through the decision-making on campuses to adapt and serve students. To build our guidance, we have established AACRAO standards and guidance to revision and work through the lens of the current COVID-19 crisis, and then consulting with subject matter experts from a board of directors and amongst the membership across the higher education community. So who is our guidance team? Our guidance team is collective of our executive director, Mike Riley, Melanie Gottlieb, deputy director, associate directors Tom Green, Dr. Tom Green and Dr. Tina Deneen, and our Director of Research, Dr. Wendy Kilgore, all who have former campus-based professional and have years of experience. We also have our Director of Government Relations, William Bill, as part of our guidance team. While this is not the normal way that AACRAO typically releases new guidance, we are balancing our process of member development with the needs to address the current crisis with something immediate to support you as you navigate through this new normal. We want to give you guidance that is thoughtful and well developed yet timely. If you have suggestions for our guidance team to consider, please don't hesitate to contact us through the contact form at acrao.org/COVID guidance. In addition to the guidance during these unprecedented times, we would like to highlight the AACRAO International Guide. Mike, next slide, please. The guide is really fantastic, and it features over 37 chapters on comprehensive internationalization, recruiting, and success of international students working with agents, joint and dual degree programs, and also we have an entire chapter authored by our Ann Koenig, who's on the line today, and Edward Devlin, who are experts in fraud detection of international records. And so we definitely welcome you to check out the AACRAO International Guide. Next slide, please. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Julia Funaki and Ann Koenig. Ann, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much, Annetta. Hi, everybody. This is Ann Koenig of AACRAO speaking to you from my home in the very hot Phoenix area. It's going to get up to 111 degrees today. But it'll be nice and cool in the Grand Canyon, which you see behind me on my screen there, about 3 hours away from here. Wish I were up there instead. Thanks for joining me, and also my AACRAO colleague, Julia Funaki, who joins us today from her home in Virginia. We know that there's a lot going on in your life, and we really appreciate your taking the time for reminders and discussion about a very important topic during this stressful time: protecting our institutions from academic record fraud. We've all seen many examples of how this COVID-19 crisis has brought out the best in people, but this kind of environment also brings out the worst of people, and we all need a reminder to be careful. So Julia, please take it away. Next slide, please, Mike.
Thank you, Ann. It's great to be with you all virtually today. This is prime time for fraudsters, both near and far, domestic and international, who are checking to see if you are paying attention to the documents that they want you to accept. We want to help you stay aware of the existence of fraud in our work environment and learn some of the signs of fraud. We all need a reminder about the importance of doubling down on due diligence and best practice in reviewing academic documents. We'll talk about the value of the need to be flexible in this very weird environment, but always within the boundaries of best practice and keeping in mind how decisions we make now will affect our future reality. Next slide, Mike. So let's get down to business. What does fraud mean? Basically, as the title of a 1987 AACRAO book on fraud says, misrepresentation. A document, person, situation purporting to be something they are not. Why? For the purpose of obtaining something that could not be obtained through an authentic means. The roots of fraud are planted in a desire to gain something of value by misrepresentation. What does that mean for us? Degrees equal dollars. In a systemic culture of fraud, as well as for an individual. Stop and think for just a moment. What makes your institution vulnerable to fraud? What would someone have to gain by misrepresentation via your institution? What is the market value of your institution's name, reputation, research, documentation, etc.? And why would someone want to capitalize on it? Who is protecting your institution? You're on the front line. Are you being on the front line? Here's a graphic. Next slide, Mike. Here's a graphic that comes from the concept of a tree of fraud, originally introduced in 2001 and then turned into a graphic. There are many types of fraud. These are some of the types of fraud that we see in education. They probably all look familiar. The ones on the right side of the tree are types of document fraud, document forgery, tampering, and diploma mills. And we deal with those most often in the admissions and records offices. The left side of the tree pertains more to the academic function of the institution. At the base of all of these are misrepresentation. But since the internet has evolved and grown, so has the tree. We need a bigger tree. There are many other types of fraud that have been perpetuated and helped along by the internet. Misrepresentation and unauthorized representation of the institution, such as the misuse of branding, endorsements, and counterfeit transcripts. Also, fake representatives, foreign agents recruiting international students and such. Financial documents for financial aid applications. Documents that are related to the USCIS. High school diplomas, transcripts, etc., used for athletics and for scholarships. We are all still watching the fallout of the Varsity Blues operation. As long as the internet has been around, we have had fake online providers. Yet now, with the COVID-19 environment, so many forms of education have gone online. Thus, beware of fraudulent course providers. Next slide, Mike. We'd now like to share 3 perspectives on why due diligence is essential. The first consideration is ethical. Creating a campus culture that rewards honesty and has a reputation for diligence is a good way to protect your institution. The public trust. Your graduates and former students are out in public, bearing your institution's banners in their careers and in the things that they do in life. Consider the recent admissions bribery cases. Students who were not admitted are bringing complaints and even lawsuits, claiming that the admissions process was not fair, that they had no chance against a stacked system. Your work is to protect the institution based on the institution's code of ethics and honesty. The legal consideration or perspective. Your institution, whether public or private, has legal obligations in many areas. To your governing and funding sources, and to all parties with whom the institution signs any kind of contract. If you enroll international students, you are legally obliged to the USCIS. Think about the current admissions bribery scandal in the United States. Think about the legal aspect. What are the defendants being charged with? Oftentimes we know this is mail fraud and wire fraud. Due diligence and due process, a policy and set of procedures that are clearly written and clearly communicated are essential when it comes to the legal aspect of handling fraud. Practical considerations. Academically, could you be putting your accreditation in jeopardy by not being careful about fraud? On an individual level, word spreads quickly when an institution is not diligent. We know that from our work. In Hollywood, they say any kind of publicity, good or bad, is good. But that's not true for us in higher ed. You don't want to see your institution's names in the media for fraud. Let's be proactive. When resources are limited, let's use them for exercising our due diligence to serve and reward the honest students and colleagues on our campus, rather than needing to put them toward fixing problems and created by people who are trying to cheat our institution. The time bomb. Think of it as a fraud as a time bomb. You don't want this ticking on your campus. Don't let an applicant's time bomb or urgency determine your timeline. That really is the tail wagging the dog. Next slide, Mike. All right. Due diligence, what are we talking about? It's a best practice, right? So what does that mean? Well, there are several principles that surround due diligence. One is staff training in document requirements and review. That means not just initial training of your staff when they come on board, but ongoing professional development so that they have the best tools at their disposal. It means a use of trusted resources, knowing the origin of the information you're using. Are you using authentic sources, primary sources? What about your communication? Is it clear and firm about the documentation requirements you have and the consequences of submitting fraudulent documents? Do you have your applicants sign and confirm the authenticity of the documentation they present? Do your employees and representatives have a standard procedure for document review that's applied consistently? I can't emphasize how essential that is. What about your verification process for irregular documents? Do you have that documented? And the follow-up and tracking when fraud has been confirmed. Have you documented that? You need to have a development documented fraud-related policy, and that needs to be shared within your institution. These are all practices that form your due diligence and help shape your approaches and responses to fraud. And now we have a polling question for you. So during this COVID-19 closures, have you made adjustments to your usual document policies? Can you answer please now? Yes, no, or not yet? And if you have anything else you'd like to add, feel free to put it in the chat window. How are we doing, Mike? We getting answers?
Yep, about 65%. So I'll leave it up for another, let's say 10 seconds. All right, and here we go.
Excellent. That's excellent. 73% of you have made adjustments, 15% no, and 13% not yet. I hope that means you'll work on it in the future. All right, let's go on to the next slide. What's the elephant in front of the room of all of us right now? Well, it's COVID-19, right? We want to convey, particularly during this COVID-19 area, that fraud preys on vulnerability created by disruption. Again, and you can read it over and over here. Fraud preys on vulnerability created by disruption. We've seen this elsewhere with a natural disaster, civil unrest, and other incidents. But with COVID, this has been a disruption everywhere. The disruption of our usual operating procedure. We're working from home, not in our usual environment. We don't have access to all the tools and resources we usually have at hand to practice our due diligence. Distraction. I don't know about you, but I have distractions in many areas of my life right now, not only professional, but personal. The safety and health of our loved ones near and far, as well as our work. Fraudsters look for these opportunities to slip in under the radar when we're not paying attention or not as close attention. If somebody is looking for the chance to be admitted to your institution or wants to get their hands on an I-20 form from your school or wants to apply for financial aid based on an admissions letter from your school, isn't now a great time for them to be on the move? Just like in our personal lives as we protect our health, due diligence is required. Next slide. So, I love this graphic, but at times like this, we need to especially reduce the vulnerability to fraud by doubling down on our due diligence. But we still have to be sensitive to the limitations around the issuing and transmission of official academic records. It's a balancing act. So how do we approach it? For that, I'm going to turn this over to Anne.
Thanks, Julia. So let's have the next slide, please. Great. So at AACRAO, as soon as we started seeing that institutions were shutting down because of COVID-19, we knew that we were going to have to develop a policy of flexibility in accepting documents, but still maintain our due diligence. Our protocol for COVID-19 closures, that is a set of policies and procedures giving guidance to our evaluators on how to handle documents during the closure period, took effect on March 14th. About a week later, AACRAO published a generic protocol and guidelines, which were based on our protocol. And we've got the URL for that in the resources section at the end of our presentation. The starting place for developing such a policy is, first of all, to know what's going on out there. Researching whether a given institution is actually closed, when it closed, what's the evidence that it's closed. That's step one. Step two is to find out what it's possible to get. Even though the institution's buildings are closed for human presence, maybe administrators are working from home, just like we are. Many can send documents via email. Some regularly issue documents through secure electronic systems that they can access from home. Some have electronic databases that can be used for verification. So you need to research this, find out what's possible, and decide, will any of these forms of documentation be considered official? Step 3 is to decide what you're going to accept. In case it's documentation that doesn't meet your usual document requirements. And you have to consider a couple of questions. Do you have the resources to decide about accepting unofficial documents? If you do decide to accept them, are you going to put conditions on the acceptance of the documents, like maybe a conditional or provisional status, and require follow-up with official documents later? That's where flexibility comes in, step 4. Flexibility works if you're well informed and you know what is realistically available now and the probability of receiving official documents later when institutions reopen. Step 5 is evaluating the effectiveness of your policy and adjusting your approach if need be. It's a continuous circle of a process and always a matter of balance. Next, please. So let's look at why we see academic record fraud and what causes it. Systemic fraud. There are certain parts of the world where we expect to see some level of fraud due to a culture of corruption. Individual, anywhere in the world. An individual person who's trying to obtain something for which he or she is not legitimately qualified. They might alter an authentic document. They might create a document from scratch. They might buy a counterfeit document with the name of a real university on it. Or they might buy documents from an online business that calls itself a university. And the situation of no documentation available. Sometimes we hear that. It's really rare that no documentation is available at all. There's usually some type of document available, no matter what is going on and no matter how normal operations are disrupted. But fraudsters might not know that. The COVID-19 shutdowns are a prime opportunity for fraudsters to think that you won't be looking carefully at their fake documents because everything is closed. Next, please. A good resource on the idea of systemic fraud is the map from the Transparency International organization, its Corruption Perceptions Index. This map gives us some guidance in paying attention to areas of the world where there are cultures of corruption and we need to be especially vigilant. 180 countries are ranked in this index. Rank number 1 being the cleanest, that's the bright yellow side of the color spectrum. And for 2019, that was New Zealand. Number 180 is the most corrupt, and that was Somalia. Think of the countries from which you see the most applicants. For example, China is number 77. India is number 81. You can check out the list on the Transparency International website to find other countries you often see. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't see fraudulent documents from countries that are more on the yellow side, the clean side, or that every document we see from a red country is automatically fraudulent. But this map gives us a guide for our due diligence. Next, please. Purchased documents. I'm going to make my comments on this topic short and sweet. You can buy any degree, any major, any courses, any grades, any GPA from just about any institution you want, real or fake. Everything is available for sale. Next, please. Here we have another poll. Julia, you want to take over on the poll?
Sure, Mike. If you could bring up the poll. We have 2 documents here, and you can move that polling box around so you can look at the documents. And on the right, we have one from Lund's Universität, and on the other, on the right, we have Lund University. Look at these documents and give us your opinion on which one of these looks like the official university transcript.
And I figure we'll give this one a bit more time just so people have a chance to give it a look.
Good, sounds great.
So I'll leave it up for another minute or so.
Lots of detail here to check out.
Sort of a pop quiz in the middle of the webinar.
That's it.
At 30 seconds.
Let's see what we got, Mike.
All righty.
Yeah, let's see our results.
Here we go.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
So just over half picked the document on the left, about just over a quarter, the one on the right. A fifth of the people said neither, and only 2% said both. Anne, give us the review.
Okay, well, here are the results. The document on the right, that's the one with the gray background that says Lund University and academic transcript in the right-hand corner, is a document that I copied from Google Images the other day. It's from a company called diplomacompany.com. The authentic document is the one on the left, the one with the white background that's written in Swedish and English. And that one was actually issued by Lund University in Sweden. So note how the purchased document, the gray one, looks nothing like the authentic one. But somebody who isn't familiar with documents from Lund University might not know the difference just by looking at them. And this brings up the point that most of us see documents, especially if we're working in a campus office, we see documents from the same institutions over and over again. So we're familiar with what they're supposed to look like. But when you encounter an institution or a document format that's new to you, go to your trusted, authentic resources for help, including your network of colleagues, which are many of us on our session today. And just as a reflection, I wonder if Lund University in Sweden knows that their name is being used on counterfeit documents for sale online. If you visit the diplomacompany.com website, you'll see how they operate. Take a look. There are lots of companies out there selling counterfeit documents. Search under your institution's name. Are your institution's documents for sale online? All right, let's move on. Our next category of fraud and purchase documents is diploma mills. Remember that I said you can buy any degree, any major, et cetera, for anything, and it's all available online for a price. The document on the left side of this slide, the dark covered one, is a template used by a diploma mill operation called University Degree Program. When a customer orders a degree, they fill in the name of the university, the person, the type of degree, the major, the date. Same with transcripts. They use templates and fill in the blanks. You might not even realize that this was a diploma mill degree if you saw this in your office, unless you compared the documents of people who bought the same degrees side by side, or unless you researched the so-called universities. The university degree program was a huge fraud operation that was shut down by our fraudbuster colleague, Mr. Alan Ezell, a retired FBI special agent who ran the Operation Dip Scan in the 1980s, busting diploma mills. But it didn't take long for this operation to come back to life. Former employees of university degree programs started up their own diploma mill operations. The diploma mill ring that's currently causing a huge ruckus is called Exact. It's headquartered in Pakistan. The numbers are staggering. It's the largest operation uncovered to date, and Mr. Ezell is right on top of it. It seems to be unstoppable. We'll give you a hint about more about that later on in our presentation. So let's go to our next slide. When we talk about diploma mills, we talk about looking for red flags, different things that we see in the documents or in the descriptions that point us to the fact that maybe this is not a real institution. So we've listed a couple of red flags that we look at. You're welcome to go into the chat box and jot down any other red flags that you're aware of. In John Baer's book on degree mills, he lists 92 red flags, takes up about 4 or 5 pages of the book. Some common ones are names of the diploma mill sounds similar to the name of a prestigious university, or not even prestigious, just any university. The physical locations, they exist only online. They're just URLs. There is no physical location, but they might use photos of existing buildings, which might not even be universities. Some of their quote-unquote faculty members might have diploma mill degrees. They give you misleading and murky wording about recognition, accreditation, etc. Let's see. Let's go to our next slide. Here is a document from directly from my evaluation workload. I'd like you to just spend a few moments looking at it. At the top of the slide is an email that accompanied this document when we received it for evaluation. So just take a look for a few moments and keep those diploma mill red flags in mind. So we'll come back to this document in a moment, but let's move on to the next slide just to give you the comparison. Next slide, please. Great. This is an authentic transcript from Trinity College, University of Cambridge in the UK for a person who has an MPhil degree and a PhD degree. So this is what an authentic document looks like. Now let's move on to the next slide, please, and go back to the document that we received for evaluation. And I just want to mention that it only took about 2 weeks into the COVID-19 closure period when we started receiving our first fraudulent documents for evaluation. We received 3 in 1 week. So this is one of them. So I see there are several red flags here that we're just going to point out. Mike, if you'll just go through those, and I'll just mention a little bit about them. Go right ahead and click them all. So just a couple of things here to notice right off the bat. The name of the institution, Trinity College, and there are lots of Trinity colleges around the world. It's playing off of Trinity College, Cambridge, UK. The format of the document, the first thing one of our evaluators said when she looked at this was, that's a spreadsheet. Anybody could do that. The data and terminology on the documents does not conform to what the real Trinity College, Cambridge, UK documentation would look like. The person's supposed thesis is in an area of study that the real Trinity College, Cambridge does not offer. The grading is not the type of grading used in the UK, and in fact, PhD degrees at Trinity College, Cambridge are not graded. And if you look in each of the corners of the document, It's quite tiny, but you see a logo and the name, The Trinity College and University. And that's the name of a specific, well-known, well-documented diploma mill. So see how the name Trinity College, they're playing off of that. Next slide, please. Here's the website, a screen capture of the website of the university. You can think of these green arrows here as red flags, all things to look at as far as warning signs about the nature of this entity. And the URL, maybe Annetta, you could type that into the chat for us, please. The URL is trinityeducation.com. And the location in quotes is Malaga, Spain. However, you can see at the bottom of the slide all these different contact points they have around the world, including emails that are Gmail and mail.com, etc. All warning signs about the nature of this. So this Trinity College and University is not the true, real Trinity College of the University of Cambridge, UK, in the United Kingdom. And actually, there are several diploma mills that play on the name Trinity College. The significant thing about this one is that it's the Trinity College and University. All right, thank you. Let's see what kind of input we might have in the chat. Great. Thanks, Annetta, for giving us the URL of that, of the Trinity College and University. So just on the topic of no documents being available, as I mentioned before, it's very rare that no documentation is available at all. But it's important for us to be aware that a fraudster might take advantage of a situation in which normal operations have been suspended or disrupted, like natural disasters, an earthquake, for example, and think that we aren't going to do our due diligence. The institution closures we're seeing today in our COVID-19 environment are only temporary. And they're building closures. Only the physical spaces where humans congregate are closed. But electronic machines that manage our data can be operated remotely from home or wherever. We all know that, right? We're working from home. Operations might be limited, but they are not completely shut down. And we can still exercise our due diligence to the dismay of people trying to get away with fraud. Next, please. So to summarize, even in the midst of the disruption of our daily routines, our crazy home lives, our stressful professional lives, we need to stay focused on best practice, and it must be rooted in due diligence while also allowing for flexibility. Follow the steps one by one and always be prepared for fraud. Next, please. So that's not the end of it. Looking toward the future. As we move into the future, each one of us will have to live with whatever policies or protocols or provisional or temporary decisions we've made during this COVID-19 time. So think carefully about the future implications of the parameters and the consequences of your flexibility. Stay informed about what is going on. Adjust your idea of flexibility as normal operations resume. And how familiar are we with the concept of a new normal? Require official documents as follow-up if you've accepted anything unofficial, and seek verification of any kind of problematic documents. Also reflect and analyze the results of your provisional decisions that you've made under this flexibility approach. Track your successes. Based on successes, can you make any adjustments in your normal policies? And note decisions that caused problems for adjustments to your policies in the future. Best practice, due diligence, always. Julia?
Okay, in case you weren't already aware, by our numerous coffee breaks and going to our website, AACRAO members and staff have been sharing many ideas and resources on the AACRAO website, in the COVID-19 newsroom and the crisis practices page. Please visit these if you haven't already. There's lots of good information there. The international staff has also been sharing its approaches to best practice. The protocol for international evaluation applies to domestic admissions and records intake as well as international, so keep that in mind. And please check out our series in AACRAO Connect, the Diary of an International Credential Evaluator, where AACRAO evaluators share our reflections on our work during the challenging time of COVID-19. Next slide. Here are a few more resources on fraud, books available from the AACRAO bookstore, and a great article in AACRAO CNU Quarterly Journal. I'd also like to mention, as you can see in the chat box, there are a lot of other resources out there as well, and some other great webinars that have been done by TISEP that you might want to check out as well. The book on academic dishonesty in the right corner of this slide has a very useful section on developing policy. A lot of the material relates well to developing policy for document fraud in the admissions and registrar's office. And one more thing, next slide. That webinar we mentioned in Alan Ezel, the Academic Credentials Evaluation Institute, ACEI, is hosting a webinar with an in-depth look at that exact diploma mill operation out of Pakistan. Once again, the presenter will be Alan Ezel, the FBI special agent who's been fighting diploma mill for decades. He's spoken at many AACRAO functions and written about fraud detection for many of our publications. Probably many of you know him and have met him, so you won't want to miss that. Now, let's open this up for questions and discussion. Annetta?
Julia. Hi, Anne. Thank you both so much. That was absolutely informative. And thank you so much for all of the guidance that you are providing for us and our institutional members. We do actually have one question before we open it up. And this is going to be specifically from an institution. So if our institution has received a document that we've determined is from a diploma mill, what do we do? Do we inform our sister schools? Like, what is our next steps with that? Can you guys help us out with that a little bit?
I'll make a couple of comments. AACRAO actually offers training on fraud, and we offer a segment on how to develop policies and approaches when fraud is detected and confirmed. And informing your neighbor institutions, absolutely yes, that is a fantastic step, because if you can imagine, you can imagine if you deny someone or you won't accept their documents, they're going to go shopping. They're shopping at your place and they're going to go shopping to your neighbors. So if you have a network of your neighboring institutions or any of the networks you're involved with, let your neighbors know that you have found this. You share the name of the person, share the name of their documents, and let them know that there's a fraudster in your neighborhood. Same way you would in your neighborhood networks if you knew there was some kind of a crime spree or something going on. That's one comment I have about that.
That's excellent advice, Anne. Thank you so much. It's reassuring to know that there is actually next steps that we're going to be able to take if and when we do find documents that we do confirm that are coming from diploma mills. So thank you very much with that. Now we would like to go ahead and open it up to our attendees. We have a couple of questions to kind of maybe get more of a discussion going. And so before I ask a couple of questions, if you would like to respond verbally, if you can let us know in the chat function in the box, Mike Sisson will go ahead and unmute you so you can go ahead and give us some of your feedback. So the first question we'd really like to know is, so since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, have you at your institution or your organization, have you seen an uptick in fraudulent documents? Is everything pretty much the same for you? Have you seen a downward spike? I wouldn't think you would with fraudulent documentation. But what is the temperature at your institutions or organizations currently? And again, if you would like to respond and let us know about what you are seeing at your institution, please just go ahead and let us know in chat. And while we are waiting for individuals to let us know if they'd like to share, I will turn it back over to Anne and Julia to just again kind of illustrate some of the documents that we are seeing internally coming to AACRAO, in addition to the ones that we have been able to highlight for you today. Anne and Julia, what are some other examples?
There was a question that I'd like to address. It's from Amanda Garcia. She asked, what does the black region represent on the map, on the Transparency International map? And actually,
That's Pakistan.
Yeah, I'm looking, it's actually a dark red. On the original map, it's actually a dark red. I think it's the monitor that maybe has changed the color. You know, the colors are different depending on what monitor or what you're looking at. So the country that looks black on the map is actually a dark red on the original map.
And that country, I believe, is actually Pakistan,
Right.
which I think was actually, I think they were about 120 on this. They had fallen a few points, but I think Anne's right that this is just a technicolor issue.
And if you're interested, I'm on the Transparency International website right now with the Corruption Perceptions Index. They have data that goes back to 1995. They have it both in table format and also in this graphic format with the map. So thanks for clarification of that.
Only Greenland is clean, huh? Oh no, there's no data.
There's no.
No, and it's interesting to see if you look at it from year to year. I don't think much changes within a 1 or 2 year time period, but it can change over time. So our great colleague Peggy Henderson gave a lot of good input as far as what the things to look for with fraud, things to confirm regarding high school documents and educational systems that have exams at the end of the school year, what's going on with those exams right now, checking. The institution's websites are a great resource to find out what's going on. Press, articles in the press and the media are also good resources.
Right, and for TISEP members, Peggy has pointed you to the resources that you can find there as well. I provided a link.
And we will, another question here is whether the participants will be able to get a copy of the presentation. And that is yes, right? Mike, Annetta, do you want to say anything about that?
Yes, it is. Since I didn't get it until late, I was not able to upload it, but I can actually do so and share the link here in just a moment while you guys are going through the Q&A.
All right, well, this is really interesting. Anne and Julia, is there anything else you'd like to share about any other experiences you've had recently regarding fraudulent documents that you've seen come across your desk, whether it be documents, emails, random correspondence, etc.?
Well, I would just comment that sometimes when a person who's submitting a fraudulent document becomes aware that you are questioning the document, sometimes they just disappear. And that so far is what's happening with our 3 cases that came in, within the first 2 weeks of COVID. That was really surprising to me that we got that many all in a row in such a short time, so soon after this all started. And all 3 have just kind of disappeared from the radar. We're in the process of working through those files. One is actually an altered document, so we will need to write to the institution for verification of it. But can be a problem with that because if an institution didn't really issue that document, sometimes institutions do not feel obligated to comment, or they can't legally comment about a document that they didn't actually issue. So each case is really you have to take these things on a case-by-case basis. But all three of the people from the first 2 weeks of the closures, all of them have gone quiet. And as you know, as we were talking about before, perhaps they're applying to neighboring institutions. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And, it's always, we give you all the steps, but it's also interesting just to start Googling these people, checking to see if they have a LinkedIn account and whatever else might be out there. And a lot of times you see that fraudulent behavior continues across those platforms as well.
Yes, and Julia, that reminds me, in my comments about that Trinity College and University diploma mill sample, I neglected to say that I went out online to look for this person who supposedly has a PhD. I do that all the time when we get PhD documents, because it's easy to find people online who have PhDs. And his LinkedIn profile, in his LinkedIn profile, he states that he has a PhD from Trinity College, University of Cambridge, UK. That's what he's put it out there on LinkedIn. So that's how I know he's trying to defraud us, meaning the higher education community.
Right. Right.
Great, thanks Peggy for that resource. The PhD, the UK also has a PhD database. And that's true in several other countries. So I think PhD degrees we have a lot of tools for verifying those, and we should use them all.
Excellent. Well, that was a really, really good example of a couple of situations where, number one, we can use a various different set of resources, especially when we're talking about verifying the awarding credential of a PhD degree. If we're not able to be working in a country which has these wonderful databases, at least with PhD degrees, we do have peer-reviewed journal articles that are readily available to go ahead and cross-reference. So it's great that you guys brought up the idea of cross-referencing as well, because that definitely is a tool that we like to keep in the toolkit of a fraud sleuth, if you will. The other thing too that you brought up that I would like to highlight too is that this is definitely one instance when we're talking about institution to institution communication and how wonderful peer resources are. Your peer institution, your individuals in your regional AACRAOs, individuals in your regional TISEP. I know we don't have regional TISEP, but individuals in your international admissions regional associations, really reaching out to those communities. Because again, if an individual is applying to your institution with fraudulent documents, chances are they're shopping within that neighborhood. So definitely let's keep in mind utilizing our peer institutions and peers as resources as well when working through fraudulent documents especially. We don't have any more questions at this time, so I would like to give it back to Anne and Julia for concluding comments, if there are any. Anne and Julia.
I'd just like to say that this has been fun. We hope you will keep in touch with us. I always like to think about credential evaluation sort of like child care rearing and Dr. Spock, who opened his famous tome with, "Trust yourself, you know more than you think you do." And then from there on, keep in touch with your colleagues, because we love this stuff and it's what we do, and we love to share resources and information. So we hope to keep the conversation going and keep the resources coming for you. Anne?
My concluding comment would be, please be involved in educating your colleagues at your institutions or in your offices about fraud, about the existence of fraud in our work. Because I'm still surprised at how shocked some people are when we talk about credential fraud or fraud altogether in the academic sphere. People don't expect it. They think, well, what do you mean? What do you have to gain from defrauding something in higher education? And our introductory slides speak to that. is, well, what is the value of your institution's documents? What kind of monetary gain can someone get from higher ed? Well, degrees equal dollars, and that's the bottom line. So please be ambassadors of fraud awareness as you get back to your work.
And integrity warriors for your institutions.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Julia and Anne. That was really, really fantastic. And thank you both so much for taking the time to share your deep knowledge and expertise with us and our membership. One of the things that AACRAO has done during the COVID-19 crisis is we have expanded our AACRAO consulting experiences to actually to go ahead and implement virtual consulting experiences. And so we have heavily discounted these consulting sessions, and we're now pricing them at $9.95. And these are really going to be tailored directly to your institution, and you will be working with seasoned experts, and you will have actionable recommendations and guidelines following your consulting experience with AACRAO. So if you are in need of specific recommendations and guidance for your institutions, please go ahead and reach out to us at consulting@acrao.org. Next slide, please, Mike. And last but not least, we do have a lot of virtual events coming up that we do look forward to seeing you there. And a couple of ones we would like to highlight specifically for the international crowd is the AACRAO Edge. We are revamping and have been in the process of revamping our international database of global education. And so on June 5th, our deputy director, Melanie Gottlieb, along with our associate director for Edge, Drew Carlisle, will be giving you a tour of the all new Edge experience. And so definitely put that on your calendars, and we really look forward to seeing you then. June 19th, we'll be working again with Cambridge International Examination Board, so looking specifically at their transcripts and want your advice about how US institutions can better read those transcripts themselves. And so that will be another interactive webinar that we will be hosting. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we absolutely look forward to seeing you at another AACRAO virtual event. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, and good luck and have a great day.